I hadn't spoken to my brother in 11 years. And yet, there I was, on a train heading west, staring at the Missouri River, with his name printed on the seat reservation next to mine. The Amtrak attendant gave me a look when she scanned my ticket, like she could smell the tension before it even sat down. I gave her a polite nod, adjusted my backpack, and slid into my seat. Leather-worn, smelled faintly of dust and old cologne, the kind of smell that clings to suits after funerals. The train lurched forward. Chicago blurred behind us. I didn't look back. The envelope was still in my inside coat pocket, stiff and sharp against my ribs. Cream-colored cardstock, official seal from a law office in Evanston. My father's lawyer, Henry Park, sent it 2 weeks after the old man died. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the envelope unopened, my wife already 5 minutes into a monologue about why I should burn it. "You don't owe him anything," she said, pouring herself a second glass of wine. "He made his choices. Let him rot." Thing is, I agreed with her. For years, I did let him rot, in my mind, at least. I built a wall around the memory of him. Concrete, thick, no windows. But curiosity has a way of gnawing through even the best construction, especially when money's involved. The letter inside was short. Too short. Just one sentence, typed with surgical precision. "If you wish to claim your inheritance, you must accompany your brother on the Zephyr westbound to San Francisco. You'll receive instructions upon arrival." No explanation. No dollar amount. Just a ticket and a date, with my brother's name, Daniel Grant, already attached. The name I hadn't said out loud since 2014. Back then, Daniel and I had matching jawlines and matching ambitions. We were two sides of a coin our father flipped every Sunday at the country club, betting on which son would fold first. I cracked. Daniel didn't. Or maybe he just hit it better. I checked my watch. Still 15 minutes until the next stop. The train hummed beneath me. Out the window, fields rolled by like forgotten thoughts, brown, brittle, still half frozen in April's indecision. That's when I saw him. Daniel stepped into the car like he owned the place. Button-down shirt, blazer, aviators hanging from his collar like a costume piece. He scanned the car, found me, and offered a nod. Not a smile, not even a grunt. Just that smug nod, like we were two executives forced to sit through a conference call, not two brothers who used to throw punches in the backyard over a stolen baseball glove. He sat down without a word. We didn't speak for 3 stops. I watched his reflection in the window more than I looked at the scenery. He'd aged well, little more salt in the beard. Still carried himself like the world owed him something. Maybe it did. After all, he stayed. He cleaned up Dad's messes when I walked away. He got the house, the business contacts, the public image. I got the silence. "You look like hell," he finally said, eyes still on his phone. "Good to see you too, Dan. I'm only here because of the money." Me too. We sat in that agreement for a while. It felt more honest than any conversation we'd had in years. I wanted to ask if he knew what the inheritance actually was, if Henry had told him more. But I couldn't bring myself to show interest. Not first. That was always our game. Whoever blinked first lost. Even at Dad's funeral, we stood on opposite sides of the casket like referees waiting for a foul. "You think he's screwing with us?" I asked eventually. Daniel laughed. Not a real laugh. The kind that leaks out like steam from a cracked pipe. "Oh, I don't think. I know. This is exactly the kind of thing he'd do." We both stared forward, as if Dad might burst through the intercom and deliver his final lecture on legacy and bootstraps. It felt fitting, somehow, that even in death, he had us dancing to his tune. The train slowed as we pulled into a Tumwa. Small station. Barely a platform. A woman in her 60s boarded with a floral suitcase and a look of practiced exhaustion. She sat across from us, gave a polite nod, then buried herself in a paperback. I envied her. She had no idea she was sharing a ride with 2 grown men, still trying to unspool the damage of a man who hadn't been kind since the Reagan administration. "You ever wonder if he actually loved us?" I asked before I could stop myself. Daniel didn't answer right away. He rubbed his palms together, cracked a knuckle. "I think he loved his version of us," he said. "The ones who didn't disappoint him." I nodded slowly. That was the thing about trains. You couldn't escape mid-conversation. No slamming doors, no walking away. Just miles of track and whatever was between you and the other person. A few seats back, a kid asked his mom how long until California. She said 3 days. 3 days. 3 days with my brother, and a mystery inheritance built on the bones of a man who never gave without a catch. I took out the envelope again, ran my fingers along the seal. It wasn't just money. I knew that already. The question was what we'd have to lose. Sleeping on a train is a strange thing. The rhythm of the wheels lulls you into a kind of half-dream where the past drifts in like fog through a cracked window. You're not quite awake, but you're not resting either. By the time we passed Lincoln, the sky was bruised purple, and the lounge car had thinned out. Daniel disappeared hours earlier, probably to the bar or maybe to call someone who didn't know what he was really like. I stayed put. Something about movement and dim lighting made it easier to think. That night, the train felt like a confession booth with no priest, just guilt echoing in the metal. I kept replaying the last time I saw my father in person. It was spring, 11 years ago. A Thursday. I'd come home because Mom was in the hospital, and despite everything, I still thought that counted for something. Dad barely looked up when I walked through the front door. Just sat in his leather armchair like it was a throne he'd bled for. "You look soft," he said, barely glancing from his newspaper. "City living doing that to you?" I didn't rise to it. That was his tactic, needle and watch you flinch. But what really got me wasn't what he said. It was what he handed me as I stood there trying to explain that I'd come for Mom. An envelope, not unlike the one I held now. Inside, a check for $10,000. No note, no explanation. "Go back to your life," he said. "You're not needed here." Like he was doing me a favor. Like money was the same as love. I tore it in half and left it on the floor. He didn't even blink. Now, 11 years later, I was chasing a different envelope on a train that wouldn't stop moving. Irony, right? I used to think life was made up of big moments. But turns out, it's the small ones that stick, the folded check, the sound of a door clicking shut, the long silence after someone walks out and never comes back. The sleeper car was nearly empty when I finally headed back. I slid into my bunk, the kind with a paper-thin mattress and curtains that never quite closed. The motion of the train made it feel like I was drifting through space. Daniel was already snoring on the top bunk. I could hear it, deep, unbothered, like a man who had stopped asking questions a long time ago. I couldn't sleep. Instead, I pulled out my phone and stared at the last photo I had of our family together. Thanksgiving 2006. The last time Mom was still trying to play peacekeeper. Daniel was already halfway into real estate. I had just started teaching. She made a stand in the backyard, balancing pie plates and fake smiles. I still remember what she whispered as she clicked the photo. "Please, just one day without fighting." We couldn't even give her that. She died 2 years later. Daniel made the eulogy about Dad. I didn't speak at all. Somewhere near the Colorado border, the train slowed for a maintenance delay. It jolted me out of my memory haze. I climbed down from the bunk, walked barefoot to the end of the car, and leaned against the door window, watching the night press in around the train like a secret. That's when I noticed something. There was a woman 2 cars ahead, pacing. Late 40s, maybe early 50s, red scarf, arms crossed like she was holding something in. She turned suddenly and looked right at me through the glass. Not a glare. Not a smile. Just this look, curious, a little sad. The way people look when they recognize pain but don't ask about it. I nodded. She nodded back. Then she vanished around the corner. The next morning, I found her in the dining car. She was reading a book on grief, the kind you find in hospital gift shops. I grabbed coffee and sat a few booths away, pretending to scroll through emails. I watched as she dog-eared a page, stared out the window, and muttered something under her breath. Eventually, I gave up pretending. "Rough trip?" I asked, sliding into the booth across from her without waiting for permission. She glanced up, startled at first, then nodded slowly. "Aren't they all?" I smirked. "Especially the ones you don't really want to be on." "Let me guess," she said, folding her hands. "Family drama. Money. Secrets." I blinked. "That obvious?" She shrugged. "Nobody gets on this train unless they're running from something, chasing something, or hoping the ride will fix something. Sometimes all three." Her name was Marlene, retired nurse, heading to California to settle her late sister's affairs. She'd been estranged for 15 years. Too much pride, she said, and too many people whispering in the middle. I wanted to tell her she was speaking my language, but I just nodded. "Funny thing," she added, sipping her tea, "grief doesn't really show up when the person dies. It shows up in every version of them you remember and every version you'll never get." That hit me like a brick. Every version I'd never get. I thought of my dad younger, softer, if he ever was. I thought of Daniel and I at 10 years old, sneaking Oreos and blaming each other for the empty sleeve. I thought of the man I could have been if I hadn't let one broken relationship define my entire family. As the train wound its way into the Rockies, I realized something else. This trip wasn't about inheritance. It was about reckoning. And whatever was waiting for us in San Francisco, it wouldn't just change what we had. It'd change what we thought we deserved. There's something about train dining cars that feels like a setup. The table's too small, the lighting's too honest, and the booths are too narrow for anyone to escape quickly. Perfect place for a confrontation or a confession. Daniel was already seated when I walked in for breakfast. He had that same posture he always did when he was about to win something. One hand resting on the coffee cup, the other thumbing through a legal pad like it meant something. "What's that?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from him. "Notes," he said, like it was obvious. "Notes? For what? A eulogy that's 11 years late." He didn't laugh, didn't even blink, just sipped his coffee and said, "Henry called me this morning. That got my attention. And he said Dad left us more than money." I leaned back, letting that sink in. "You mean this whole trip isn't just about writing a check and playing nice?" Daniel looked at me like I'd asked if grass was green. "It's a trust. Conditional. The kind lawyers love to explain in 10 pages when one line would do." I rolled my eyes. "Of course it is." We were quiet for a moment. The waiter brought eggs and toast that tasted like regret, and Daniel kept fiddling with the edge of his napkin. I knew that look. He was gearing up for something. He always had this tell, a twitch in his jaw, a tap of his ring finger on the table. "You remember the winter Mom caught him with that real estate agent?" he said suddenly. I froze. That memory hadn't crossed my mind in years, but it returned now like a cold wind through an open door. We were teenagers, maybe 16 and 17. Mom came home early from work, found them in the den, not fully undressed, but undressed enough. The woman's name was Carla or Candace or something that started with betrayal. Mom didn't cry, not right away. She just stood there and asked Dad one question. "Is she worth losing your sons over?" He never answered. That was the first crack. After that, the house got colder, even when the heater worked. Family dinners turned into microwave trays and missed calls. Daniel and I tried to stay united, but slowly, we picked sides. He clung to Dad, the one who paid the bills and promised cars at graduation. I stayed with Mom, the one who cooked dinner even when no one showed up to eat it. "He made her feel invisible," I said softly. "He made all of us feel invisible," Daniel replied. "But you left." The words hit harder than I expected. Not loud, not cruel, just accurate. "You think I didn't want to stay?" I asked. "You think I didn't lie awake for months trying to figure out how to make it work?" "You stayed, sure. But you stayed for him." Daniel didn't deny it. He just looked tired. "I stayed because I thought I could fix it. Thought if I was the good son, I'd earn something." I laughed, bitter. "Yeah, well, turns out we both lost. Just in different ways." The dining car emptied out as the train sped through a series of tunnels. For a moment, the windows went black, reflecting our faces. We looked like men who used to be boys who used to believe their father could change. "He told me something once," Daniel said, voice quieter now. Said, "Don't ever let your emotions get in the way of a good deal." I nodded. He said the same to me, right after he sold my first car behind my back. We both chuckled, not because it was funny, but because laughing was easier than remembering how much that moment hurt. "So what now?" I asked. "We ride this train, pretend we're not both boiling under the surface, and show up at a lawyer's office like two civil adults." Daniel pushed the legal pad toward me. On it was a list of names, bank accounts, property titles, offshore holdings. I scanned the page, heart pounding. "You've already looked through all this?" "Got a partial file from Henry last week. He wanted me prepared. And I didn't get that courtesy. You weren't answering your phone." "Touché. But one name stood out. Carla Simmons." I pointed to it. "Why is she listed here?" Daniel hesitated. "She's the executor." I blinked. "You're kidding." "No. Dad named her as the official executor. Not Henry. Carla." Suddenly it made sense. The condition. The train ride. The silence. This wasn't just about money. It was about revenge. Dad's final act wasn't just to force us into a room. It was to make us sit with the woman who helped ruin our family, and let her decide who got what. "That sick old man," I muttered. "He really never stopped playing games." Daniel looked out the window, his reflection flickering in the glass. "Maybe this isn't a game anymore," he said. "Maybe it's the final test." We sat there, Two grown men staring down a legacy neither of us asked for, trying to decide if the price of getting it was worth what it would make us. I don't remember when I stopped thinking of my father as a person and started thinking of him as a problem. Probably around the time I realized he left bruises that didn't show up on skin, the kind that settled in your voice and hollowed out your memories. We were crossing into Nevada when Daniel came back from the luggage car holding something wrapped in an old tweed jacket. "This was in one of the lockers," he said, dropping the bundle onto the sleeper cabin table like it weighed more than it should. "Had your name on it." I raised an eyebrow. "You sure it wasn't meant for both of us?" Daniel shook his head. "Nope, just you. Initials engraved on the tag, RG, your middle name." I stared at it. The jacket was his. Dad's. Still smelled faintly of cigars and winter. I hesitated before unwrapping it, like maybe it'd bite. Inside was a small, lockable box. Old brass, tarnished at the edges, like something that had sat forgotten for decades. There was no key. Daniel tried to pry it open with a butter knife, because of course he did, but nothing budged. Then I remembered something. Back in 2007, I'd gotten a call from Mom asking if I wanted anything from the attic before she donated it all. I told her no, but she sent me a shoebox anyway. Inside was a photo album, some cufflinks, and an old hotel key. I'd kept it, not because I thought it mattered, but because throwing it away felt like tossing out the last neutral memory I had of my dad. I dug it out of my backpack. To our surprise, it fit. Inside the box, a leather journal, one flash drive, and a folded sheet of paper with 2 words scrawled in Dad's unmistakable handwriting. "You choose." Daniel and I exchanged a glance. It was the first time in years I saw fear in his eyes, not the kind you get from losing something, but the kind you get from learning something you can unlearn. I opened the journal. Page 1 started like a letter. "To whichever one of you reads this first. I always knew neither of you would come out clean. That was the point. I raised 2 survivors, not saints. One of you betrayed me. One of you tried to save me. But in the end, I know both of you blamed me. That's fair. What's not fair is how I was painted as the only villain." I flipped the pages slowly. The handwriting wavered in places, like he'd written it after too many drinks, or maybe during his illness, whenever it began. "Carla was never the problem. She was just the match. You both were the fuel." He wrote about things I didn't remember, and things I wished I didn't. He talked about the time Daniel sold family shares behind my back to keep the business afloat. About how he'd suspected I'd tipped off a journalist about the affair, the article that came out 2 weeks after the divorce, with photos only someone close could have taken. I looked up sharply. "You told him about my interview?" Daniel shook his head. I never said a word. But he knew. Daniel stood and started pacing, rubbing his temples. He always knew. "You think he didn't have people watching both of us?" He just didn't say anything at the time because he stopped himself. "Because what?" Daniel exhaled. "Because he wanted to see what else you'd do." My throat went dry. He wanted me to betray him? He wanted to confirm what he already believed. The flash drive was labeled for the chosen. We plugged it into Daniel's laptop. Password protected. We tried dates, our birthdays, moms, even the day of the divorce. Nothing. Then I thought of something stupid. Or maybe just cruel enough to be right. I typed in disappointment. It opened. Inside were video files. Dozens of them. Most were surveillance footage. Old, grainy clips of our childhood home. Office meetings. Hotel lobbies. One was a voicemail from Daniel begging our father to intervene in the company. Another, a recording of me, freshman year of college, drunkenly ranting about how I hoped the business burned to the ground. He kept everything. Cataloged every fracture, every failure. As if betrayal was a kind of currency he could collect interest on. The final file was labeled The Split. It was a video of Dad, sitting in that same leather chair, weeks before he died. He looked thinner. Meaner, somehow. Like the sickness had boiled him down to his worst traits. "Here's the deal, boys," he said, looking straight at the camera. "Whoever makes it to the end of the ride, you get it all. I don't care if you fight. I expect it. But only one name goes on the account. You decide. Or don't. Let it rot in probate for all I care. Just remember who gave you the game in the first place." The screen went black. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel said, "So, this was never about trust. It was about survival." I nodded. He turned our lives into a contest. "Worse," Daniel said. "He made us the judges." I sat back, heart thudding like I'd just run 10 flights. The cabin felt smaller than it had minutes ago. The walls, the windows, the air, all pressing in. "So what do we do?" I asked. Daniel looked at me, eyes hollow. We finished the ride. I didn't know then whether he meant the train or the game. Maybe he didn't know either. But one thing was clear. Only one of us was going to walk away. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. While the train swayed and the world outside passed in silence, I stared at the ceiling of our sleeper cabin, hands folded over my chest like a man waiting for judgment. The box. The journal. The flash drive. You choose. What kind of father sets his sons up like that? Not just for conflict, for collapse. He didn't just pit us against each other. He wrote the script, built the set, and sold the tickets. By sunrise, we were rolling past the edge of Reno, and the landscape had shifted from hills and trees to something harder, flat, scrubbed land that looked like it had forgotten how to hold life. Somewhere in the quiet, Daniel disappeared. Again. I found him on the platform during a brief stop in a town so small it didn't even have a proper station, just a concrete slab, a vending machine, and a cracked wooden bench. He was standing by the edge of the platform, hands in his coat pockets, staring off into the desert like it owed him something. You skipping town? I asked, stepping up beside him. He didn't look at me. I thought about it. I waited. The wind kicked up a few small pebbles across the track. The train hissed behind us, as if impatient. You ever just want to hit pause on everything? He finally said. Just disappear? I nodded. About once a week. He turned, studied my face like he was looking for a lie. I don't want it, he said. The money, the business, the guilt, none of it. That surprised me. He'd always been the heir apparent, the polished one, the closer. The kid who turned a lemonade stand into a vending machine hustle by the time we were 11. Then why'd you get on the train? He hesitated. Because I thought I owed it to Mom. To finish what she started. I blinked. What does that mean? He pulled a folded letter from his inside pocket. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting delicate, hers. She wrote this the week before she died. Never mailed it. I found it in her jewelry box years later. It's addressed to both of us. He handed it to me. The ink had faded a little, but her voice came through clear, gentle, exhausted, and full of the kind of heartbreak only mothers seem to know how to carry. If you're reading this, I hope it means you've forgiven each other. Or at least tried. I know your father made things hard, impossible, even. But sons don't have to become their fathers. You can choose better. Please don't let him live inside you longer than he lived on this earth. I had to sit down. It felt like the wind had knocked the breath out of my chest. I hadn't thought about her voice in years, not the sound of it, but the tone. The way she used to soften the sharpness in our home. The way she apologized when she hadn't done anything wrong. Daniel sat beside me, elbows on his knees. I brought the letter because I didn't know if we'd make it to the end of this thing without tearing each other apart. And he shrugged, still up in the air. The train let out a warning chime. Last boarding call. Daniel stood but didn't move toward the door. I'm thinking of getting off here. I turned sharply. You're serious? Yeah. Let you take the money. Take the mess. You're better at handling broken things. That line hit deeper than I cared to admit. Don't do this, I said. Not like this. Walking away doesn't make you the better man. I'm not trying to be the better man, he said. I'm trying not to become him. The platform was empty now. The attendant waved toward the train with a clipboard. We had seconds. I grabbed his arm. If you leave, we both fail. That's the game he set. He wanted one of us to walk away bitter and empty. Daniel looked me in the eye. So what? We play his game out of spite. No. We break it. He hesitated. Then nodded. We boarded together, stepping back onto the train as the doors hissed shut behind us. Two grown men, sons of a man who made war a family tradition, finally choosing not to fight. Back in the sleeper cabin, Daniel pulled out the journal again. What if we donated it? He said. All of it. I blinked. The money. Yeah, all the properties. The accounts. The investments. Let them rot or build something. Just not for us. You think that's what Mom meant? Choosing better. He looked at me. I think she meant choosing each other. That stuck. I didn't say yes. Not then. But for the first time since the envelope arrived, I started thinking about an ending that didn't leave one of us burned. The train rocked gently as it picked up speed, leaving the station, and, maybe, the worst of our father, behind. San Francisco looked softer than I remembered. It was early evening when we pulled in, that golden hour light draped across the platform like something out of a movie. The train hissed and groaned to a stop, but inside me, nothing felt finished. The wheels had stopped turning, but my chest still buzzed like we were in motion. Daniel stood beside me, both of us silent, watching the platform fill with people greeting family, hugging, rushing off into lives that made more sense than ours. I thought I'd feel something, I muttered. You don't. Not what I expected. Just tired. He nodded like he understood. We didn't speak much on the way to Henry's office. Our father's longtime attorney worked out of an old building downtown, the kind with too many marble tiles and a faint smell of polished wood and old books. It was a place designed to make you feel small and unprepared. Henry was already waiting in the conference room, flanked by boxes of files and a black leather briefcase. He stood as we entered, gave us a tight-lipped smile, and gestured to the seats. I didn't expect both of you, he said, sitting down across from us. Pleasant surprise. Don't thank us, Daniel said. We're still deciding if it was a mistake. Henry chuckled politely, then opened the briefcase. Inside was a single folder. Your father was many things, he said. Charming, ruthless, meticulous. But above all, he was consistent. I leaned forward. What does that mean? Henry opened the folder, slid a document across the table. He left a final addendum, dated the morning before his death. I picked it up and scanned it. It wasn't legalese. It wasn't even typed. It was a letter. To my sons. If you've made it this far, I suppose you've earned the right to hate me a little less. Or maybe more. Either way, if you're reading this together, then I misjudged you. And that's the first time I've ever been glad to be wrong. I always believed legacy was built on survival, that the strongest made it through, and the rest were just casualties of sentiment. But near the end, something changed. I started having dreams. Not about success or empires or deals. About you too. Young. Laughing. Stealing my bourbon and blaming the dog. I remembered the way you defended each other when the neighbor accused you of breaking his fence. You were 11. Daniel lied through his teeth to protect you. And you, Jamie, you were ready to take the blame just to keep peace in the house. I raised you like rivals because I didn't know how to raise sons. I thought preparing you for a hard world meant making you harder. But that was my failure, not yours. So here's my last offer. Not a game, a choice. The trust is yours, jointly. The conditions are void. You don't have to split it. You don't have to donate it. You don't even have to agree. But whatever you do, do it together. Or walk away with nothing. That's my last ask. You choose. Dad. The room went quiet. Daniel let out a slow breath, leaned back in his chair like someone had just taken 50 pounds off his chest. I'll be honest, Henry said after a beat. I didn't think he had that in him. I folded the letter carefully. Neither did we. Henry pulled out a few more forms. The account's ready whenever you are. No rush. Take your time. We walked out without signing anything. Outside, the sky was turning that soft orange gray that only happens in California evenings. Daniel turned to me on the steps. So now what? I laughed. Honestly, I thought you'd have a plan. Me? I figured you'd write an op-ed about it and donate the royalties. We stood there like two kids let out of detention, unsure whether we were free or just between sentences. Then Daniel said something I didn't expect. We should start something. I raised an eyebrow. Like a business? No, not business. Something better. A foundation. Mom always wanted to open a shelter, remember? I did. I remembered her circling newspaper ads, her voice soft as she talked about helping women who had nowhere to go. She never got to do it. Too busy patching up the men around her. We do it in her name, he said. No games. No branding. Just something good. I stared at him. You serious? He nodded. Then yeah, I said. Let's do it. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. It wasn't forgiveness. Not really. Some wounds don't close that neatly. But it was forward motion. And after being stuck in the past so long, that was enough. 2 months later, we stood in front of a small brick building outside Chicago with a news sign. Marion House for starting over. We funded it together. Half from the inheritance. Half from Daniel's company after he sold his stake. He said he wanted out. I'm tired of selling lies, he told me. Time to build something real. I believed him. We didn't talk about Dad much after that. Didn't need to. He'd already said his piece. And now, finally, so had we. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still think about that train. About the whistle echoing through the dark, the rocking of the tracks, the way ghosts crept in when sleep wouldn't. But mostly, I remember getting off and choosing something better.